In the cold, shadowy waters of Lake Champlain, something colossal has moved since the 19th century. They call it Champ, an indescribable creature seen by fishermen, tourists, and even police officers. The first newspapers in 1880 spoke of a giant serpent rising from the waves. Decades later, a terrifying photograph shocked the world, and sonar expeditions recorded submerged forms that science has never been able to explain. For some, it is only folklore. For others, it is evidence of a prehistoric survivor, a real monster hidden in the depths. Between indigenous legends, official reports, and modern investigations, the mystery only grows. What hides in the dark waters that divide the United States and Canada? What we are about to reveal in this story may forever change the way you look at Lake Champlain. Because to this day, no one truly knows what dwells there. The question is, would you dare to face the lake when night falls? In the icy depths of Lake Champlain, where dark waters reflect the snow-covered mountains of Vermont, a colossal shadow glides silently through the centuries. This is no ordinary lake. It is a portal to the unknown, a window into mysteries that challenge our understanding of reality. Stretching 193 kilometers along the border between the United States and Canada, Champlain is more than just a body of water. It is a cemetery of secrets buried beneath layers of silt and history. Its depths reach 122 meters at some points, creating abysses where sunlight never penetrates and where impossible creatures could inhabit without ever being discovered. During the American War of Independence, British soldiers and American colonists navigated these treacherous waters, never suspecting that something much older and more dangerous than any army watched them from the depths. In the War of 1812, sailors reported strange waves that appeared from nowhere on days of absolute calm, as if some titanic force was moving beneath the surface. But the first to know the true nature of the lake were the Abnaki Indians. In their oral traditions, passed down from generation to generation around smoky campfires, they whispered about Tatoskok, the great spirit of the waters. It was not a benevolent deity, but a primitive and terrible entity that slept in the lake's darkest depths. When Tatoskok stirs, the Abnaki legend said, the waters boil and the fish flee. When it emerges, the sky darkens and the winds stop. And when its eyes open, it is better that men are not around to see. The first European colonists initially dismissed these stories as primitive superstition. But when the first official reports began to emerge in the 19th century, a disturbing question echoed through the misty valleys around the lake. What if the Abnaki were right all along? The year was 1880, and the world was changing rapidly. The Industrial Revolution was transforming rural landscapes into urban centers. Railroads were cutting across continents, and science seemed capable of explaining all of nature's mysteries. But in the waters of Lake Champlain, something happened that would challenge all the certainties of the modern era. On July 24, 1880, the Whitehall Times published a headline that would make history: SEA monster sighted in Lake Champlain. The article described the testimony of steamboat Captain Nathan H. Mooney, who swore he had seen a water serpent of gigantic proportions emerging from the waters like a living column of flesh and scales. The creature was at least 25 feet long, Mooney reported to the journalist, his hands trembling as he held a cup of coffee. Its head was the size of a whiskey barrel, with eyes that gleamed like green lanterns in the mist. When it looked at me, I felt as if my soul had been ripped from my body. But Mooney was not alone. In the following months, dozens of similar reports flooded the local newspapers. Fishermen described nets torn by something of tremendous strength. Tourists reported giant waves that appeared from nowhere, violently rocking their boats even on days of perfect calm. The most disturbing was the account of Emma Thornton, a schoolteacher from Burlington who was having a picnic with her students on the lake shore. "I saw something moving under the water," she wrote in her diary, which was discovered decades later. "It was as if an entire island had come to life. The children screamed when the water began to boil around us, and then a head emerged, a head larger than any creature that ever existed on Earth." The newspapers began calling the creature Champ, a reference to the lake itself, which had been named after French explorer Samuel de Champlain. But there was something sinister about the way the reports multiplied. It was as if the monster was awakening from a deep sleep, becoming more active or more hungry. By August 1880, the number of sightings had become so frequent that local authorities issued warnings for fishing boats not to navigate alone after sunset. Something was moving in the depths of Champlain, and whatever this thing was, it didn't seem to fear the humans who invaded its territory. If the reports of fishermen and tourists could be dismissed as fantasies or exaggerations, what happened in the 1970s would change everything. Because when trained police officers, Coast Guard officials, and municipal authorities begin seeing the same impossible creature, the line between reality and legend becomes dangerously thin. Sheriff Dennis Bartholomew of Essex County still remembers the night of September 15, 1976, as if it were yesterday. "I was skeptical," he admits, sitting in his office filled with certificates and commendations. 30 years on the police force, I'd seen everything. I thought this lake monster business was nonsense to attract tourists. But on that foggy night, while patrolling Route 22 along the lake's western shore, Bartholomew saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "It was almost 11:30 p.m. when I saw enormous waves hitting the beach. This was strange because there was no wind. I stopped the car and grabbed my flashlight. What he saw under the moonlight left him paralyzed. A head the size of a small car emerged from the waters, followed by a neck that seemed endless. The thing looked directly at me, and I swear there was intelligence in those eyes. Intelligence, and something that seemed like hunger." Bartholomew immediately called for backup on the radio. Within minutes, 3 patrol cars arrived at the scene, and 4 additional police officers witnessed the creature sliding back into the depths, leaving only giant waves and a strange smell in the air. Something between rotten fish and ancient moss. But it was in 1977 that the case took on international proportions. Sandra Mansi, a tourist from Connecticut, was having a picnic with her family on the lake shore when she decided to take some photos with her Instamatic camera. "I was just photographing the landscape," she remembers. "Then something emerged from the water. My first reaction was absolute terror, but instinctively I pressed the camera button. The resulting photograph became one of the most analyzed and debated images in the history of cryptozoology. It shows a serpentine figure emerging from the lake waters with a long, undulating neck, a distinctly reptilian head, and what appear to be humps, protuberances, along the back, typical of prehistoric aquatic reptiles. The photo was submitted to every possible test. Forensic photography experts from the University of Vermont, the FBI, and even NASA examined every pixel. The verdict was unanimous. The image had not been manipulated. Dr. Roy Mackle from the University of Chicago and cryptozoology specialist declared, "This is possibly the most convincing photographic evidence of the existence of an unidentified aquatic creature I have ever seen. If it's a hoax, it's the most sophisticated ever produced." But there was something disturbing in the official reports that began to accumulate. The police officers weren't just describing an unknown animal. They spoke of intelligence behind the creature's eyes, of a sensation of being studied by something much older and wiser than themselves. And all mentioned the same inexplicable feeling, that the creature was not just a survivor from the past, but something that was waiting for the right moment to reveal its true nature. As reports accumulated and evidence became impossible to ignore, two factions emerged as opposing armies in a battle for truth. On one side, skeptics armed with scientific theories and rational explanations. On the other, believers supported by physical evidence and unquestionable testimonies. What followed was an intellectual war that would divide the scientific community and capture the world's imagination. Dr. Philip Reynes, a marine biologist from the State University of New York, led the skeptical offensive. "What we have here is a classic case of collective hysteria," he declared at a press conference in 1981. Lake sturgeons can reach impressive sizes, up to 3 meters in length. When seen partially at the surface, especially in low visibility conditions, they can easily be mistaken for a mythical creature. Reynes had powerful allies. The Smithsonian Institution published a detailed report explaining the sightings as a combination of floating logs, storm waves, schools of fish, and the psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns in random shapes. But on the other side of the trench, disturbing evidence continued to accumulate. In 1983, the Champ Quest expedition, led by cryptozoologist Joseph Zarzinski, introduced state-of-the-art sonar equipment to the lake. What they discovered in the depths left even the most fervent skeptics speechless. "We detected submerged objects moving at speeds impossible for any known fish," reported Zarzinski, examining the sonar data with growing incredulity. "We're talking about something at least 10 to 15 meters long, moving at 25 kilometers per hour underwater." For comparison, the fastest freshwater fish, the wahoo, reaches a maximum of 10 kilometers per hour. But the most disturbing data came from the depth sensors. The detected objects dove to depths of more than 100 meters and remained submerged for periods that would challenge the lung capacity of any known animal. "Whatever is in the depths of Champlain," Zarzinski murmured to his team, "doesn't follow the biological laws we know." The University of Vermont, initially skeptical, was forced to acknowledge that something extraordinary was happening when their own marine biology students began documenting anomalous aquatic behaviors. Professor Dr. Margaret Helms, a specialist in lacustrine ecosystems, reluctantly admitted, "We are observing aquatic movement patterns that don't correspond to any species cataloged in the region. There are moments when the lake seems alive, as if it were inhabited by a unique intelligence." The situation became even more puzzling when researchers compared Lake Champlain data with similar reports from Loch Ness, Scotland. The similarities were impossible to ignore. Long-necked creatures, anomalous underwater movements, and apparent intelligence behind the sightings. Dr. Adrian Shine, who had spent decades investigating the Loch Ness Monster, visited Champlain in 1985 and made a statement that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. "If there is only a 1 in 1,000 chance that a population of prehistoric creatures has survived in deep and isolated lakes, then Champlain would be one of the most likely habitats in the world. The conditions here are perfect to sustain something that should have been extinct millions of years ago." But as scientific evidence accumulated, a new terrifying question began to emerge in academic circles. What if the Champlain creature was not just a prehistoric survivor, but something that had evolved specifically to remain hidden until now? What began as isolated reports from fishermen transformed into a cultural phenomenon that captured global imagination and forever changed the identity of an entire region. Champ was no longer just a mysterious creature. It had become an icon, a symbol, and for many, a dangerous obsession. In 1985, the state of Vermont did something unprecedented in American history. It approved an official resolution protecting Champ from any harassment or harm. The resolution declared that the waters of Lake Champlain and the creature known as Champ are part of Vermont's unique natural heritage and must be preserved for future generations. But legal protection came too late to contain the fever that had seized the region. Tourism companies began offering champ hunting expeditions, promising tourists the chance to spot the legendary creature. Boat tours, which were once tranquil family trips, transformed into tense expeditions where every shadow in the water was examined with binoculars and every suspicious wave was obsessively photographed. Captain Morgan's Landing, a lakeside restaurant, installed a security camera system directed at the waters with a single purpose: to capture Champ on video. The owner, Jack Morrison, admits his motivation wasn't purely commercial. After living here for 40 years and hearing these stories, you start to feel like you're being watched, especially when you're alone on the dock at night. The obsession spread beyond regional borders. Television documentaries, international magazine articles, and even Hollywood films began exploring the Champ mystery. The Discovery Channel produced a special 3-part series, Monsters of the Deep, Champ Revealed, which attracted more than 15 million viewers worldwide. But it was the creation of the International Champ Investigation Society in 1987 that marked a dark turn in the saga. Founded by former Navy diver Robert Henderson, the society attracted obsessed investigators from around the world, some of whom began exhibiting increasingly extreme behaviors in their search for truth. Henderson and his team installed permanent monitoring equipment in the lake's depths: underwater cameras, motion sensors, aquatic audio recorders. What they discovered haunted them. The audio recordings are the most disturbing, Henderson reported in a 1989 interview, his eyes showing fatigue that went beyond physical exhaustion. There are sounds coming from the depths that don't correspond to any known animal. Sounds that seem like communication, as if something is trying to talk to us. The audio tapes, when analyzed by Cornell University, revealed complex ultrasonic frequencies that suggested some kind of primitive language. Dr. Sarah Chun, a specialist in bioacoustics, described the recordings as deeply disturbing. It's like hearing echoes of intelligence that preceded humanity. But perhaps the most significant development was Champ's transformation into a multimillion-dollar industry. The official mascot of the Vermont Lake Monsters, the region's baseball team, was a friendly representation of the creature. Postage stamps, t-shirts, toys, and even a local beer brand, Champ Ale, capitalized on the legend. However, behind the tourist marketing and commercialization, something more sinister was happening. Local residents began reporting disturbing dreams after sightings, recurring nightmares about dark waters and bright eyes watching them from beneath the surface. Some longtime residents began avoiding the lake completely, especially after sunset. "It's no longer about whether Champ exists or not," murmured Eleanor Prescott, an 89-year-old inhabitant whose family had lived on the lake shores for 5 generations. "The question is, why is it becoming more active? And what does it want from us?" As the 20th century came to an end, a terrifying perception began to spread among those who lived near Champlain's dark waters. Perhaps Champ wasn't just a creature trying to hide from humanity. Perhaps it was an ancient force that was awakening and studying its new neighbors. More than 140 years after the first official report, the Champ mystery not only persists, it has evolved. What began as occasional sightings of a mysterious creature has transformed into something much more complex and disturbing. A phenomenon that seems to have developed its own intelligence, its own agenda. Data collected in recent decades paints a picture that challenges our understanding of aquatic life. Between 1990 and 2020, more than 300 official sightings were documented, each more detailed and puzzling than the last. But the pattern of sightings suggests something no scientist is willing to admit publicly. The creature is learning. Dr. Michael Torres, a marine biologist who has spent the last 15 years studying Champ data, discovered something that keeps him awake at night. In the first reports, the creature appeared randomly, mainly during the day. But since 2010, the sightings follow a specific pattern. It appears at strategic locations, almost always when there are only one or two witnesses present. It's as if it's testing our reaction. Modern technologies have brought new evidence, but also new terrors. Autonomous diving cameras installed in the lake capture images that researchers hesitate to make public. In a 2018 recording, a colossal form can be seen gliding through the depths with a grace that defies the laws of physics. But most disturbing is a moment in the video where the creature seems to pause and look directly at the camera, as if it knew it was being observed. Tom Bradley, a fishing guide who has worked the lake for 30 years, reported an experience that changed his perspective forever. It was early October 2019. I was taking a couple of tourists fishing when the water around us began to boil. Then it emerged, bigger than anything I'd ever seen. But it wasn't the size that scared me. It was the way it looked at us. There was recognition in those eyes, as if it knew me. Bradley pauses, his hands trembling slightly. After it dove back down, I found this on the side of my boat. He shows a photo of deep scratches in the fiberglass, marks that experts described as impossible to make by any animal known in the region. The most recent reports include details suggesting that Champ is not just inhabiting the lake, it's interacting with the environment intelligently. Fishermen report that fish flee certain areas of the lake weeks before any sighting, as if they knew something was approaching. Navigation equipment mysteriously fails at specific points in the lake, always the same locations where later sightings are reported. Dr. Lisa Hartwell, a specialist in aquatic animal behavior, made an observation that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. We're observing evidence that the creature is modifying its habitat. Underwater structures that didn't exist 5 years ago are appearing in sonar scans. It's as if it's building something. But perhaps the most terrifying discovery came from DNA analysis of the lake water. In 2021, samples collected at multiple points revealed genetic sequences that don't correspond to any known life form on Earth. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a geneticist from Harvard University, described the results as biologically impossible. It's as if there's a life form in the lake that follows completely different evolutionary rules. As 2025 approaches, a new generation of investigators is preparing for the most ambitious expedition ever attempted on Lake Champlain. Equipped with manned submersibles, 3D mapping equipment, and state-of-the-art biological sensors, they intend to explore the lake's most inaccessible depths. But among local residents, there's a growing sense of apprehension. "We've lived with Champ for more than a century," says Margaret Stone, mayor of Whitehall. "There was a balance, a peace, but lately, things are changing. It's as if he's preparing for something." As the dark waters of Lake Champlain continue to guard their secrets, a question resonates through the centuries. What really inhabits the icy depths between Vermont, New York, and Canada? Perhaps Champ is, as skeptics insist, just a series of misunderstandings and collective illusions. Perhaps it's a prehistoric survivor, a living echo from an era when impossible creatures dominated Earth's primitive seas. Or maybe it's something much more extraordinary and terrifying, an intelligence that observes, learns, and waits, a force that connects the world's deep lakes through mysteries our science cannot yet understand. Because when night falls over Lake Champlain, when the waters become black as ink and mist obscures the distant mountains, there are still those brave or foolish enough to navigate alone. And they all ask the same question, whispering to the silent waters, "Champ, are you down there, watching us?" The truth remains hidden in the depths. But one thing is certain. Lake Champlain guards secrets that could change our understanding of life on Earth. And perhaps, just perhaps, those secrets are ready to be revealed. Would you have the courage to dive into the dark waters to discover the truth? If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share it, and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.